School, Shimla. These interviews will provide us young readers with an open channel of communication between senior and young writers or readers to learn more about their personal journey. Professor Meenakshi teaches literature, is a translator and a poetess. She has authored 11 books and is an erudite resource person on issues of women and gender. She is the recipient of Okhad Saman and the Shiksha Gaurav Award, as well as the APJ Abdul Kalam Award for Education. Vyaktitva, Baatcheet Ka Karwa talk show is specially curated for children to give them the opportunity to engage with senior writers and artists in a casual and unpermeated manner. During the next 52 weeks, you will meet with 52 personalities, and all our interviewers will be school, college, or university students. These interviews will be held at Brews and Books Cafe, Shimla, that offers an open library for all to use on the concept of borrow, exchange, donate, and will be live streamed live for all our patrons on Kikli's Facebook channel and Himachal Tonight's YouTube channel. Kikli Media Channel was founded 10 years ago in 2013 by Ms. Vandana Bhagra, which provides a platform to promote creative writing and reading among children. Over the years, she has organized several inter-school competitions and skill-building workshops like elocution, creative writing, and poetry. Another positive step in this direction was the introduction of Kikli Book Club, especially for young readers. Today, under the aegis of this club, in collaboration with media partner Himachal Tonight, Association of Book Clubs, and Food for Thought Foundation, I am here to present the second episode. I once again welcome you here.
Thank you so much, Rita. It's my pleasure.
And firstly, I'd like to ask, what drew you to teach literature exactly? And why did you choose to pursue this field?
Okay. Literature, because I've always been a storyteller and I love stories, I love poetry, I love to ramble in my imagination, and so it's very difficult to do maths if you have such a mindset. So because it allows me to daydream, it allows me to imagine other lives, it allows me to go on journeys with other people, other characters, and explore worlds. Living in a small town like Simla in the olden days, travel was not very easy. So the best way to travel was, therefore, through books, through characters. So right from Gulliver's Travels, yeah, to what is that? Chacha Chaudhary, and the stories of Tenali Rama. So you could, and it's nice to know about other cultures. It's nice to, in one lifetime, be able to travel to Russia, to be able to travel to Africa, to be able to go to the moon, and imagine all kinds of lives. So I would say students of literature are very privileged in this sense that they can live multiple lives, more than the 9 lives of the cat. They can enjoy that, but also because literature gives you an insight into life. And that it shares with philosophy the basic questions of what life is all about and how we as human beings experience life and what we think about life. And I do think literature makes us better human beings. Why? Simply because we recognize that there are other people who are as essential, as free as we want ourselves to be. Is that a good enough reason?
Yes, ma'am, definitely. Any reason is good enough.
Yeah, true.
You can never question a reason.
Correct. How are you so wise in class 9? I was so lost in class 9, I really didn't know what was happening.
That's the same case. The only difference is reading does make an impact on how you think.
Yeah, sure. It does broaden your vision and your understanding. And I'm an Auckieite too. So, and Auckland and other schools, they give us the opportunity to read, to speak, to engage, to debate, to discuss without any restrictions made on us, yeah, of ideology or points of view. I think the only thing that we were told by our teachers was to respect each other and to
Yes.
respect, what the other person is saying and to listen. I think Auckland House में बहुत ये होता था. Shh, listen,
Yes.
shh, listen. So we were trained to listen, isn't it?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So some of the wisdom of our teachers and our gurus and the people who we have read, we tend to internalize it. I don't know how much we are able to apply it, yeah, but we do become familiar with those thoughts. Yeah.
So, ma'am, at what particular age did you decide that you wanted to pursue a career in literature and teaching? Was it something you knew
Yes,
from a young age?
not literature, because literature was the love of my life, और love of my life को career बनाना बड़ा मुश्किल सा होता है actually real life में. So I'm happy that my stars worked themselves out and I could. But teaching right from school, right from a very young age, I was very fond of gathering together children and take a foot ruler and say, sit down and listen to what I'm saying. I think I love the sound of my voice. And teaching is one profession that allows you to go on speaking for half an hour at least, if not more. But seriously, I come from a family of teachers. Both my grandmothers were teachers, and it helped because they were also great storytellers, and they had an extraordinary sense of humor, which I think I've inherited from them a little bit, and they would teach by telling stories and make me laugh, and it was my nani who gave me a sandook full of books.
Nice.
Yeah, and then she says, okay, this is my inheritance to you. I didn't understand what inheritance means. I loved the books. I think the first book I read from that sandook was Lorna Doone. And it's about this young, hapless Angrez girl and how she's comes into contact with the outlawed people. And it was a great story. And when I was reading it, the Sholay movie came out. Yeah, so I could make instant connections with the Wild West, with the outlaws, with Dakus, and then I understood how seamlessly literature brings cultures together. Yeah, so it was quite an eye opener. I remember that book very vividly. The second book I remember was Thomas Hardy's A Pair of Blue Eyes, which again had a very beautiful character of the heroine. These books stayed with me. And so one book leads to another, as you know, you can't stop reading. In spite of the fact that your mother will be shouting at you and saying, book band karo, kuch kaam kar lo, safai kar lo, ye kar lo, because when you take up a book and you get interested, then there's nothing else you want to do, isn't it? So I also remember reading with a torch under the quilt because I was supposed to be asleep, but got caught ultimately.
Thankfully, I've never had to do that.
Lucky you.
Definitely. And what sort of genre do you most usually read? What attracts you most?
Oh, I read everything. Fiction, poetry, drama, to a lesser extent, drama. I like drama being performed more. And but there are something non-fiction I don't read too much of. But yeah, biographies I might read some. So fiction, stories, poetry, those are things that interest me.
Now, speaking about drama, it is quite obvious since you are a professor and teach literature that you probably would have read Shakespeare as well and probably do teach it to others as well. So, what play do you like the most?
Shakespeare's play?
Yes.
Midsummer Night's Dream and Twelfth Night. Those are my favorites. I don't like to be sad. I love the madness. The madness of, Gade Ka Sir. And the girl loving that Gade Ka Sir. It's interesting. I loved it. How the fates and other beings interfere with our lives and influence our lives, which of course are metaphors for our own consciousness, for our own deep thoughts, our subconscious, and what we try to make of life. However, it's not to. And Twelfth Night, It's a comedy of errors. Yeah, the other play comedy of error here too. So, girls dressing up as boys was very interesting. Um, because Shakespeare's times, girls could not act. They couldn't go on stage. And during the time when I was growing up, also, girls were doing a lot, but not so commonly. So when you have girls who are able to go into the world as you like it, you have Rosalind, it opens up possibilities for women to see, okay, we can also do this or do that. Today, there's no limit,
Yes.
yeah, to what girls can do. And I think these imaginings, these stories have opened up that door for us to walk through. I think so, yeah. But I like the tragedies also. One tragedy which I didn't like initially was Hamlet, because he was such a dilly-dally person, to be or not to be, bhai marna hai to mar jao, nahi marna to mat maro. I mean, just take a decision. But today, I think Hamlet is a favorite. Because especially when you are elderly and you understand, we understand how a young boy would not be able to even take a decision on seeking revenge when the mother is involved and the uncle is involved. It's very traumatic. And when you have trauma, then you can't think clearly. So you could be in a mental and emotional paralysis, which is what. But then he takes that device of a play within a play and enacts the crime, which should remind us of that movie. कौन सी movie थी वो? Rishi Kapoor and Simi Grewal, and they acted out on curves. That idea comes from there. Yeah? So, and then to see it comes out of the mental to the physical, and then he's able to take revenge. He's able to act. So that's a great play. I like it.
Okay. Unfortunately, I haven't read as many Shakespeare plays, and even if I have read one or two, I could not understand the language too much.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
too complicated.
You need to learn that language. But it's a beautiful language.
Yes,
And he writes in poetry, iambic pentameter, which is one of the greatest, meters in the language.
Right.
And it's very rhythmic. So if you know how to read that with the stressed and the unstressed and the stressed, then you would get the flow of language. Then it won't be too difficult.
Okay. Actually, today we had our Shakespeare trophy as well.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
Who won?
It was a 10th former, and she performed from Henry VI,
Okay.
Joan of Arc's speech.
Oh,
Yes.
nice. Poor girl, murdered for speaking the right thing.
Hmm.
Now, Joan of Arc is a great heroine. She's one of the greatest heroines for young girls because she went to death, but she wouldn't compromise. And she went to battle. That was very nice. When I was in school, we performed Joan of Arc. And you know that we used to call her Indra. I think she's called Sonia now. Raja Bhasin's wife now. She was Joan of Arc. Oh, it was a great play. It was a great play. So yeah, if you get used to the language, then the play really speaks to your heart. अब जरूरी भी नहीं है कोई मॉडर्न प्ले पढ़ लो.
Yes, ma'am. Definitely need to take that suggestion into account. And speaking of Shakespeare, I did Taming of the Shrew.
Oh,
and
you did?
yes, Catherine's final speech about how she basically lectures other women that you need to be obedient and submissive to your husbands. So, considering that you have also done a lot of gender studies, what are your thoughts on what the situation currently is and what it was portrayed like in Shakespeare's play?
Oh, there is no comparison. First of all, I don't like Taming of the Shrew. That's one play I didn't like. But what Shakespeare was saying is true of what Indian society was also all about. That's the famous phrase from Shakespeare, "Frailty, thy name is woman." But there is also the very famous saying that men may love more and show more, but women love more deeply and more sincerely. So these are not Shakespeare's points of view, these are the characters' points of view. However, gender studies is not only about men and women and their positions in society or their roles and responsibilities in society. It is also about understanding your own self, how you identify yourself as. We also talk about a spectrum of gender. So, and transgenders, we mustn't forget, in India, transgenders are now really in the forefront of gender studies and queer studies. And अभी तो एक वो निकला है ना, I believe एक show या whatever it is called जिसमें सुष्मिता Sen is acting as Gauri Sawant.
Yes.
Tali. I am looking forward to seeing it because traditionally transgenders in India have been well assimilated in society. They had very important roles to play, whether it was in the courts of the kings or whether it was in real life. But over a period of time, they became marginalized and sidelined. Why? Because unfortunately, all the laws and rules only talked about men and women. So the transgenders were not implicitly considered and therefore they became othered and they were ignored. They were not even sort of given a personhood in Indian society. For all practical purposes, they were invisible and did not exist. So they couldn't be educated, they couldn't get jobs, and they couldn't even be treated in hospitals because the hospital forms had male and female. But now, as of now, things are changing. The courts have been proactive, Parliament has been reactive, and administration is working towards incorporating them. The UGC has sent out letters to instructions and guidelines to colleges and universities that we must be gender inclusive, which also means, my dear, there is something which is known as gender dysphoria, where I may have the body of a girl or a woman, but inside me I might feel like a man. We need to understand that it is all right, that it is not a disease, that it is not a psychological disorder. It's just who you are. The self inside is neither male nor female, nor trans, nor bi, nor whatever. Yeah, it is just the self. But if I like to grow mustaches, then I should be allowed to. And if a boy wants to dress up in a sari, the boy should be allowed to, without being subjected to ridicule. Of course, little children, young children may not be able to even understand what they want or they feel, and it could just be a passing phase, and it may not be permanent. That too. So it is a very sensitive area where parents, teachers, peers, and medical professionals and psychotherapists, etc., all need to get together to give an enabling atmosphere, environment to the young person, so that the young person may, in their own way, be able to go through and see what they really want to be. Okay. However, there are also people who speak against this and say that it only confuses people, and therefore, and gender should not even be taught in schools and colleges because it breaks the structure of society as it exists now. So, in that sense, it becomes a very grey area. However, for me, gender simply means to accept people the way they want to be accepted. That's it.
That's a very eloquent answer, and I would say one that I definitely like because
I'm glad. Thank you.
because it's
Thank you for
not
your
usually
opinion.
that people talk about these sort of issues or even topics. It's a topic that's usually ignored or steered away from even in schools, and even in today's time in our schools, we're not taught about gender in such a specific manner or so deeply. We're simply just told, okay, there's this and there's that, and that's it. We end it at that, but we really need to realize that there exists a lot of problems, a lot of different issues or topics that still are there and need to be discussed so that we can move forward with them.
True. And what is basic is, being respecting the other person. Yeah,
Exactly.
so we just respect whatever people choose for themselves and don't treat them as monsters or freaks or there's something wrong with this child and just leave. But schools का problem क्या है? Problem नहीं है. Schools are restricted by the courses that are prescribed, you see, and school courses go through a very rigorous process of evaluation. So, what should be taught to the children in the larger context of the well-being of society and the individuals concerned, जिनको course पढ़ाया जा रहा है, it's very important. So, syllabi will not be very radical. Yeah, things go into the syllabi very slowly, so they percolate slowly. But today, you do know that it's okay for girls to stand up on the stage and declaim and put their points across. पहले नहीं होता था. पहले लड़कियों को स्कूल में क्या सिखाते थे? Embroidery. है ना? ये सब सिखाते थे. जैम बनाओ, अचार बनाओ. हमने भी सीखा है. And the famous Auckland House fudge, etc., which we were taught. And it was said it's good. You are well educated. But आज तो these are also taught to boys. These are all taught to everybody because these are life skills. And embroidery may not be a life skill, but sewing a button is definitely a life skill. Yeah. So we teach it to everybody regardless of gender. But पुराने ज़माने में boys को क्या सिखाते थे? Carpentry, gardening, और हमें क्या सिखाते थे? खाना बनाना और ये सब करना. So अब दोनों सब कुछ सीखते हैं. तो आज तो कोई किसी लड़के पे नहीं हंसेगा अगर वो एम्ब्रॉयडरी कर रहा है. The best artisans are men. Also, नहीं तो गलत बोलते हैं. Women and men, they are the best. So there's nothing man-woman about it or transgender about it. Yeah. What do you think?
Yes, definitely, I agree. And lastly, in all of your gender studies, have you noticed some sort of unique or interesting point that isn't most commonly known to other people? Like the society in general doesn't know about this, something like that.
Yes, when I was reading it, the idea of gender dysphoria really spoke to my heart. Because the trauma that people go through when they think they are freaks, there is something wrong with them because they are not behaving as society expects them to. And that's a mental and emotional trauma that really shook me as I was. One of my students just did a PhD thesis on transgenders, and she was talking to the Hijra community. And the stories that came out were stories of great trauma that these individuals went through, but also stories of great courage. I would say heroism. You know, to be able to come out of self-doubt is one of the greatest achievements of human beings. नहीं तो हम तो हमेशा ही डाउट में रहते हैं. हर चीज में हमें लगता है कि हम ठीक कर रहे हैं, नहीं कर रहे. We seek validation from outside. We are never complete in ourselves. We always ask our friends, ठीक था, है ना? I'm sure after this session I will ask Vandana, ठीक था, कोई problem? We always looking for approval. But how much more a person who somehow has to put up a front and behave like a girl, where actually she wants to behave like a boy, or vice versa. And then parents reject you, or your society rejects you, and then you're thrown out of mainstream. And how do you last? How do you go through it? And self-hatred, or this idea of yourself not being adequate or enough for yourself is a terrible trauma. I'm so glad that girls like you have this opportunity to be yourself. Otherwise, to be told at every step that what you're doing is wrong, when that thing is natural to you. It's not something acquired. It's who you are. And then people are telling you who you are, that you are wrong. That really, the pain and the trauma and the courage that people show in that situation is something that I really learned from and I really admired.
I definitely feel privileged enough by the fact that I am able to do what I want now, especially as a girl, or even as a person, because that's not the choice that most of the time people do get. And even to study in such a school where you're taught about so many things, that is a privilege as well. And I'd say recently I had a newfound respect for the troubles that teachers go through.
I'm so glad.
Definitely.
I'm so happy.
I had definitely a newfound respect for everything that they have to go through and for how they have to manage so many children. So I'd like to ask you, what was the biggest challenge that you faced as a teacher up till now?
Yeah, looking back, when I started teaching, it is to manage the diversity in class. Because there are all kinds of children in class. Some are very advanced in their learning curve, some are very behind. Also, people come from different backgrounds, different circumstances, different homes. And as a teacher, I am not privy usually to what is happening in their lives apart from the time that they are in my class. And it is a minefield, I'm telling you, or what you say or the examples that you give in class, because it might trigger some child. Something that you say may be a child's reality and may hurt that child very much. So teachers really have to be very careful of the words that they utter or they speak. Also, to be able to be impartial with your class. That is a skill that has to be learned, and that's an attitude which has to be internalized, because it is very natural to like children who fit your idea of good students. It's very natural. And children who perform well, so you don't have to do too much hard work with them. Or children who are very weak and who you want to help and feel good about yourself. As a teacher, very help you aggrandizes your ego. You need to be free of all this. And you have to look at students as individuals and be mindful. And also to be respectful of the students. Which doesn't come naturally, let me tell you, because teachers also need to have class control. So we can't allow chaos in the class unless for short spans of time. But there'll be no teaching done if there's too much confusion. So everybody has to be somewhere on the same page. But my classrooms are noisy classrooms generally. Even if Vanna has been my student. So we talk, we discuss, we are easy, we laugh. At least that's what I like to think. I'm not sure whether my students think the same. I'm not sure about that. You have to ask them. But yes, to forget your own worries too, because teachers also have homes and they are in society and they may have problems at home, looking after children or looking after elders or having no support at home or going through an illness or a loved one going through an illness, and you enter the classroom and you need to forget all that and you need to focus on the kids. That is where I think teachers really need to master their emotions and be able to overcome the mental stress. Apart from that, teachers really work hard.
Yes, definitely.
They have to prepare for their lectures in the evening or late in the night when the family is asleep. Then they have to get up early, go take their classes, but also do stacks and stacks of corrections, which is not very easy. And it's backbreaking work. And all teachers usually have neck problems and they have spondylitis, so they have, hunchbacks, etc. Because there is a lot of writing and reading to be done, because teaching cannot be done without reading and writing. So teaching is only 20% of the work that the teachers do. Yeah? Because you really need to be abreast of the subject, you really need to update yourself. And even if you're teaching a nursery or a kindergarten, there are new ways of teaching that are evolving. There are new researches and discoveries that are approaching every day. And you need to keep abreast of that, because you cannot say, तुम तो ABC पढ़ा रहे हो, a, b, k, so उसमें क्या करना है? But how you deliver that worker and how, especially at that young age, how you manage the personhood of your students and the selfhood of your student, and you don't injure, because one careless remark by a teacher can mark a child for life. So we have to be very careful of what we are saying. And most of us make mistakes. I made my fair share of mistakes. Yeah, but we learn from them. Try to be better every day. Mm.
I I never really understood why they used to say that teaching is the greatest profession, but as you grow older, as you experience more things, slowly things start to make sense. So that's what I'll say, because considering what has happened in school, what happens every day, and my conversation with you right now, this really does make an impact on how I think about teachers and teaching as a profession.
I'm so glad because teachers have lost some of their value in society because education itself has become quite transactional all over the world. And teaching is one of the most stressful professions in the world. There's a recent study which says, and teachers are quitting. If they can, they quit because it's very burdensome. And to have young lives, my principal, no, my English teacher, Mrs. Rita Wilson, she used to say, we don't deal with paper and files, we deal with human minds. And therefore, we need to be very careful. And what is, inscribed on a human mind is very difficult to erase. So we need to be careful. But I'm not sure it's the greatest profession. Each profession is great. Yeah.
Yes.
So I admire doctors, medical professionals. I don't know how they go on and on for days.
They definitely
And
have
the
this
emotional
special-
trauma of losing a patient, and they're so overburdened, and they have to study night and day too. They really have to keep abreast of any subject, any profession. It requires dedication, hard work. It requires honesty. It's very important. Yeah. So not only teachers are great. All are great. Huh.
Definitely.
Running a cafe, so difficult.
Basically, yes, every profession is great, but considering on everything I have learned till now, it does change some opinions that you form early in life, or whatever you hear from other people and see. And moving on, I'd like
But
to ask.
usually, teachers are the brunt of students' jokes.
हाँ, definitely.
ये some comic figure.
I cannot
अपना सारा
deny.
सुसान पे निकाल दो, है ना?
I cannot deny that. I cannot deny that.
But that's also a form of love.
Hmm.
Yeah, because if somebody matters to you, तभी तो इतना करोगे ना कि उसका नाम रख दो. मैं तो क्यों time waste करोगे? So they do matter somewhere, no? That's why.
Definitely.
So friends एक दूसरे का nickname रखते हैं,
Hmm.
तो teachers का भी रखते हैं, तो it's a good healthy place.
Okay.
I don't want to know any nicknames I have. I don't keep. This would be interesting though to know.
And moving on, I'd like to ask, as someone who translates so much and has written so many articles and poems as well, how do you manage your time between teaching and doing everything else that you like? That professional balance, how do you manage to do that?
Barely. It's very difficult, really. Translation is an arduous thing to do. It's not easy. Poetry comes sometimes. I'm not a great poet, and I'm not a very prolific poet. Just a few lines here and there. But that comes suddenly too, and then you're looking for कागज दे दो, napkin पे लिख दो, and that kind of thing. Now mobiles have come, so you can key it in. That's good. But I'm not much of a poet really. But translation is something because I love to do it, so I would find time to do it. No, so wherever I. The point is you need to love something, and if you love it enough, you will find time. So even if you have to give up on 1 hour of sleep, or maybe go out on, give up on going out with friends, then that's something that you naturally do. You know, I think so. But it's difficult to find time. Yeah, because teachers' workload is increasing every year now because there's lots of data to be worked upon. There's a lot of monitoring that's happening for the sake of policy and to make education better. But paperwork is also taking a large chunk of our time. That's something new. It didn't happen in the olden days. We're getting used to it. And thank God we have computers to help us put the data, etc.
Although, ma'am, you say that you're not much of a poetess, I would still request you to read one of your poems for us right now.
Oh, really?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Hindi or English? Maybe English because the whole conversation going on in English only.
Up to you, your choice.
Yeah. Okay. Right. I think I will read a very, it's an old poem. It's called The Dian. You know what a Dian is?
Yes.
A woman who is supposed to have some negative metaphysical powers. Yeah, that's a Dian. Um, this is from a poem. This is a poem which I wrote after I saw a news item some 3 years ago maybe or 4, about an old woman who was dragged out of her house by the villagers, saying that she's a Dian and she was beaten, etc. And very old woman. So this is how I wrote this. Pritha? She's a Dian, they said. She has brought calamity and misfortune to many in the village. She has evil power, they said. Tell me then, if she has evil power, how come she looks old and frail? Why can she barely walk? And why does she collapse when the able-bodied men dragging her let go of her for a bit? How did she let them blacken her face and garland her with shoes, drag her around the village at a trot? How come? Because she's not Dian. There is evil here, but it is not she.
Yes. And that was a very amazing poem, short but eloquent, which speaks about how society is in general. And given the context of the poem, it seems extremely melancholic and basically reveals the sad reality about what happens most of the time in society.
Yeah.
I'll
And this idea of the Dian or the prostitute or the witch or whatever is part of gender. Yeah, it's how women are perceived and sometimes othered and sometimes victimized. Yeah, so you have labels stuck on people, and you need a scapegoat. So the Dian is a scapegoat. That's what she is.
sad but true in a way because this happens a lot.
Yeah. Would you like me to read another poem that I recently wrote?
Definitely, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. For sure.
Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I should or not. But it's a very simple poem and I like it very much. It's called Tie a Knot. You know, in the olden days, अगर हमें कुछ याद रखना होता था, तो हमारी नानी दादी अपने आंचल में यहाँ knot बांधती थी, ना साड़ी में या दुपट्टे में ऐसे knot बांधते थे, and the knot would remind them कि मुझे कुछ करना है. So that was a technique, amazing technique, to remember something important that you had to do. So this particular poem is taking from that. It's called Tie a Knot. We all breathe air and all bleed red. Remember that, she said. Tie a knot in your sari's pallu and never forget. When the city burns and humanity skirms, when they call you names and make false claims, touch the knot, remember. When the tide heaves and in sickness leaves the rotten remains of past hatred and venom, turn the knot, remember. When your ancestors rise from the depths of your dreams, singing of past wrongs, seeking vengeance at your hands, hold fast the knot, remember. When your blood curdles or bile curls your toes, when your eyes glaze with rage or your heart quakes with fear, tell the bead of the knot and remember, your mama said, we all breathe air and all breathe red.
That was
I
definitely.
hope you like it.
Yes, ma'am, definitely. That was really emphatic.
Yeah.
And
Tell the knot is, like you tell the beads of the mala.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it's like a prayer. The knot, you need to remember that hatred needs to stop, that we need to be loving, forgiving. We need to make a new start. Whether it's our personal lives, whether it's our social lives, whether it is a larger community life, we really need to realize that we are all human beings. That's what I strongly believe.
Hmm.
And that's what I like to share with my students.
And what inspired you to write this? What was there some sort of event that happened when you wrote before
Not
you wrote
really,
this?
but it was just the mood of the times where, yeah, everybody was getting very upset on racial, ethnic, religious, regional issues, and there was a lot of undercurrent of rage that we were feeling in society. And so perhaps this comes from there. And it's kind of nostalgic about the good times when you could run to your grandmother or mother and be told nice stories which gave us human values and sort of made, okay, the world is not such a bad place and there's place for goodness in the world. Yeah, that kind of feeling. I think that's what I wanted to convey.
Speaking about goodness, usually, even though we're told not to label people, there does come a time when we do that. We say that that's a good person, that's a bad person, that person has a bad influence on you. Do you believe that when people say that's a good person or that's a bad person, that can define them? Is that something that
No, not really, because it is your perception that you are projecting onto that person, and it is your subjective opinion of what is good and what is not good. So basically, when you label people, actually you are being labeled because it is your mindset which is out there. So nobody can define another person. No, never. And we individually are trying to define ourselves. I don't think we completely succeed in defining ourselves either. It's an ongoing. And labels don't work. Labels should not work, and that's stereotyping. Yeah. So when we what we need to do is to understand people, to know more about them, if they are willing to share. If they're not willing to share, there's no need for us to poke them and say, tell us, tell me. It's just respecting other people. It always boils down to that. And good or bad labels make no sense. Everybody is good in a way and bad in a way, and we need to strive to try and be uh, happiness bearers if we can, for ourselves and for others as much as possible.
Okay, and moving on. In the brief bio I was given, there was written about your doctoral dissertation as well, that you wrote on Toni Morrison, Isaac Singer, and John Steinbeck. So, out of all of these three authors, whose writings did you enjoy the most?
Oh, that's ancient history. Okay. Well, I like them all. That's why I took that topic. And I must pay respects to my supervisor, Dr. Anil Wilson. He was the best supervisor I could have had. Talking of not labeling people, he was the loveliest of people. He was fun, he was sincere, he was erudite, perfect, a perfect teacher. He would engage with us, he would provoke us to think, he could discipline us. I was in awe of him, really, I was in awe of him. He was a great guide and a wonderful human being, as people who know him would know. Unfortunately, sir left us too soon and too suddenly. But I remember Wilson sir telling me that, Meenakshi, take up a topic that really speaks to your heart. Because it's donkey's work, you'll be doing this work for 5 or 6 years of your life. And so don't pick up a topic which is in fashion or, which is something that's really coming up. But like what you're doing. You need to like what you're doing because you're going to be a donkey carrying this thesis for a good part of a decade. So I read Toni Morrison. She was the first. I had already read Steinbeck, because Steinbeck students in class read, no, in school, of Mice and Men. That's one of the most beautiful novellas about human friendship. Yeah. So I had already read that, but then I read Grapes. I had read Grapes of Wrath. It was a book in the Sanduk, my Nani's Sanduk. So I had read it at a very young age. I must have been in class 3 or 4. I hadn't understood much of it because it's a plodding novel and it's about the great drought and the economic depression and how farmers had to struggle to live. It had made no sense then. All I could understand was there was a lot of dust and people were traveling, and there was a murder. So I had to read it again to really understand it. It's a masterpiece, The Grapes of Wrath. When I read Toni Morrison, a black woman novelist and writer, who it was the first Nobel winner of black women. I read her novella, The Bluest Eye, which was the first book I read by her. I couldn't put the book down. It was such a read, and it was such a horrific read. Because Morrison is talking about the brutalization and dehumanization that slavery brought upon the black people. And since then, Morrison is my favorite author. And I was very sad that she passed away. But Morrison is somebody who I go back to time and time again. Not because she talks about the blacks and their history, but she talks about humanity. She talks about humanity at a very visceral, deep level where it cuts to your soul, really. So Morrison is my favorite. I like Steinbeck very much. Singer was a challenge. Singer was totally new. It's European Jews, Polish Jews who have migrated to US, and how they are making sense of their culture in this new country. So the country of origin and the country where they are at. It was very intriguing, and I didn't know any Jewish culture. I had never met a Jew in my life, so it was totally new, something really exciting for me to read. But all these three diverse, so there was a white Anglo-Saxon male writer, and then there was this Jewish Polish writer who was an immigrant, and then you have a black woman writer, and ostensibly they had nothing in common. So many people told me it's foolishness to take this topic because you never get it done. However, Wilson sir asked me to take a psychological and social cultural take on their writings, and that led me to Eric Fromm and other psychologists, which then really spoke to me because it's either about looking towards affirmation of life or it is going on a destructive path and negation of life. And that's what we do every day. Either we affirm life or we deny life. Yeah? So that's how the pieces came through. Okay. I'm very privileged to have worked with Wilson Sir. He's the love of my life.
And since you spent most part of a decade doing this thesis, what was your favorite part about it? What?
About the thesis?
Yes.
Oh, everything. All the sweat and toil and the readings, reading articles by other people, trying to make sense of it, and then suddenly one idea will say, and I say, wow, this is okay, this is making sense. And I loved it. I loved the writing also, though it was, I loved the reading more than the writing, because writing was strenuous, and I was teaching in St. Bede's College at that time. And I had a full-time teaching job, so I had to sit late at night and write. Grateful to my students that they bore with me at that time, and my principal and my colleagues in the English department who gave me a lot of support so I could write. So writing took about 3 months, but reading took about 5.5 years. Yeah, so and that's my message to my students. You don't have to immediately start writing. You need to have something here and process it and be able to go to the depth of it and understand it fully, and then you write. Because it's not journalism. Because in journalism, there are deadlines to meet, isn't it, Ritanjali tells? So you have to be quick, 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 and you need facts. You need the facts and you put them out there. But for us, we need to process those facts, then relate them to life, and relate them to society, and relate them in a philosophical way to the human journey on this planet Earth, and then we get down to writing.
Because when you study literature, it gets very subjective. Every person can have a different view. Every person can take a different meaning out of what you have read. So definitely,
That's true. That's
right.
right. And my students have surprised me many times with their perspectives, with their points of view, which were eye openers for me, which I had not thought about. Mm.
Now, what evoked your interest in folk wisdom?
My dadi, she used to tell me all stories. ऐसा हुआ था वैसा हुआ था बलि था वो उसने पाँव रखा उसने 3 कदमों में 3 लोग नाप दिए and also it was my dadi. She was a great storyteller. Yeah.
And what's the most interesting piece of folklore that you've ever come across?
Oh, I like them all. They're all about magic and the devtas and it's all of it. I love all of it. And the wisdom in the proverbs and the riddles. Riddle. हमारे when we were small, हमको रोज riddles बोलते थे. अखबारों में riddles छपते थे. And children's magazines में riddles छपते थे. And we pass time asking riddles of each other. I don't see that happening very much nowadays. But riddles have folk wisdom in them, the wisdom of generations in them, and proverbs and sayings. वो तो बड़े मजेदार होते थे, बहुत ही मजेदार. What was that? क्या बोलते हैं उसको? भूल गया मुझे अभी. उसको क्या बोलते हैं जिसके पास कोई काम नहीं होता? बेला. हाँ, बेला नाई कुत्ते बोरे. क्योंकि नाई के पास कोई काम नहीं है तो वो कुत्ते ही पकड़ पकड़ के उनको शेव करी जा रहा है या बाल काटी जा रहा है. You see, so वो दादी का मतलब ये था कि काम करो. No, don't sit idle. You'll be doing destructive things. So these proverbs and sayings were extremely interesting, and they were part of my growing up. And one of my students is now working on that topic. So it's interesting. You must also dig up old sayings and regional sayings, local sayings, and don't lose touch with your own native language, with your own mother tongue. That's something we must have because there's a rich culture there and there's rich wisdom. Because when it comes from the folk, it is local knowledge. It is local knowledge and it is very relevant to our lives. Yeah.
I feel that as a reader, I shouldn't have asked you to pick a favorite part since I understand that as a reader, when you get engrossed in something, it's difficult to choose.
Yeah.
Especially if you're asked to compare from different things and then and then asked to present your views or say that yes, this is my favorite.
Yeah,
that gets really
favorites
difficult.
are not a good thing, no?
Yes.
So there's so many favorites. So you only papa.
That's too difficult.
Yeah, and then whatever favorite you say, maybe in that particular moment.
It always changes. That's why I don't keep favorites now.
Good. Be impartial.
Yes. And now, ma'am, I'd like to ask you to read one of your translated works as well.
Oh, really?
Yes, ma'am. I'm really curious about your translated works as well.
I think I'll read a poem or maybe a part of a story. I don't know. You tell me. What do
I'm
you
a
think?
part of a story.
A part of a story?
Yes.
Let me do that then. Okay. This is a story that I translated. It's called Thegde Ke Phool. It's written by Murari Sharma, one of our famous writers from Mandi. And it goes like this. Standing at the raised edge of the field, Chunu surveyed the fig tree carefully. His eager searching eyes closely examined each branch and leaf of the figda, as though a treasure lay hidden somewhere among them. Spring was in full bloom. Fields and crops, forests and meadows, all swayed in the golden breeze. The heady fragrance of wildflowers, the just bloomed burans, kachnar, and kuja pervaded the air. The soft shoots of the fegra tree at the boundary of the field gave a feeling of freshness. Among them nestled the small, kafal-sized green fruit, and Chunu searched for something in their midst. Ever since his Dadi had told him the story of that magical blossom, Chunu has known no peace. Yet he cannot share his restlessness with anyone else. He wants to keep his secret for now. Once he finds the Phaedra blossoms, what a great time it will be! He will get anything in the world just sitting at home. Isn't that wonderful? The Phaedra blossom is truly miraculous, Dadi had told him. But it can only be seen by an especially fortunate person. To an ordinary person, it remains invisible, even if it is right there. Chunu couldn't understand this mystery, but that didn't matter to him. He just wanted the Phaedra blossom, nothing else. This was the purpose, the goal, or perhaps the fulfillment of his life. Then it must be a magical flower, isn't it, Dadi? Chunu had asked inquisitively. Yes, we can say that it is, Bitwa, Dadi lovingly called her grandson Bitwa. Then, deepening the mystery, Dadi said, if someone finds the Phaedra blossom, their house will always be prosperous. Their grain basket will never be empty, and all their desires will be fulfilled. The blossom brings peace and happiness. So, this story goes on how Chunu keeps looking for the Phaedra blossom, and Phaedra blossoms cannot be found because they are inside the fruit, right? So you don't see them. But this is about a little boy imagining what he will do if he gets magical powers. And then because अकेले उसको मिल नहीं रहा है, तो फिर वो अपने दोस्त को भी साथ ले लेता है कि चलो you also come and we will go looking. And it is Dadi who indulgently keeps telling him, yes, this tree does. This flower is seen only by the fortunate ones. And so Chunuk said, and I am also fortunate, am I not, Dadi? You always say that I'm very lucky. Dadi laughed. Yes, of course, my boy, you're very fortunate. You're the light of my house. Born after 4 girls, one after the other, you, my Vitwa, are the answer to our prayers. And there you have gender. Yeah? There you have gender. So why can't I find the Phaedra blossom? Have patience, son. Let the season change first. It's not the season yet. Nothing grows if the time is not right. Everything has a season. Folk knowledge. Everything has a season. And so Chunu, of course, keeps looking for the flowers. He had dreams. Dreams about what? Dreams that there will not be a dearth of money in the house. He will give Bapu some money. They will eat jalebis. They'll be able to buy things, shoes, etc. So Chunu looked high and low, but usko nahi mila. And then Chunu took into confidence his friend Dhannu. What will you wish for if you find the Phaedra blossom? I'll ask for love for everybody, Chunu responded. I'll ask for love. So from money to shoes, jalebi, comes down to love. And you see how the child is processing magical powers. We all have this magical power. We just need to discover it. You'll ask for love? Ha ha ha! Dhanu burst out laughing. You moron! The flower increases grain, brings plenty. It doesn't remove hatred from the heart. Stupid. It doesn't. So magical powers don't remove hatred. We look for magical powers for material gain, not for love, not to remove hatred. We don't need to look for that magical power because it's already inside us. We need to find that blossom inside us. Why not? If the flower can bring plenty, surely it can increase friendship. Oh Yara, if you have to ask for a girl's love. That's done for you. Then, of course, Chunu goes into a daydream and he looks at the iron Rakshas is grinding the rocks and spewing smoke from his mouth, which is, of course, a stone crusher. So for the child, it is something new, that machinery. And mountain ko kha ja raha hai. Huh? The stone crusher. Very relevant to the environment theme and how we are seeing the mountains fall today. And he calls it, Dadi says, it is Tundi Rakshas. Yeah. So this environmental disaster is like a Rakshas attacking our environment, and we are the Rakshas also. So we need magical powers to heal our trees, our mountains, our rivers. Anyway, so he keeps dreaming, and then he suddenly thinks that they are flying. Chunu said to Dhanu, let's fly. How? How? Stupid. The miracle blossoms in our bags. We will fly like Hanumanji. Then let's fly. Higher and higher, they both rose up with the wind. The bushes, waterfall, trees, hills were left far below. Like Hanuman, they rode the chariot of the wind from one corner of the sky to the other, flying freely, doing acrobatics like aeroplanes. Are you having fun? Chunu asked Dhanu. Yes, very much. And you? Imagine the gliders. Me too. It feels like being on the Ferris wheel. Now let us drop a blossom on the Jogni waterfall. In this waterfall, there is a story that people used to, go and pray there, and miraculously, big utensils would appear which people could use for their carriage, shadi, or some such thing. And then they had to return them there at the waterfall. And then when they needed them, they could pray and to the water body, and again they would get it. But once they did not return all of them. And then since then the utensils didn't come. So that's the folk story, okay? And then he says, let's put there, and then the magic of the waterfall will again arise. So you can see there's a comment on society, social issues, so many of them that you find in this story. And both of them were tired from all the flying, and now they wanted to return to land. So what did they doing? They're throwing the fragrant blossoms. The barren land has become green. The waterfall is in its full glory. Fish are swimming in the stream. After years, the watermills began to turn, and the springs and step wells filled with water. The vanished birds reappeared and chirped on the trees. The wounded hill healed, and grass and trees sprang up as though nothing had happened. So magic. I wish we could turn back the magic, the time with our magic. Both of them were tired. And now they wanted to return. They saw the brimming pool in the stream and could not hold themselves back from jumping straight into it. Bache karte hi pani dikhta hai, they jump into it. Chapak, chapak. Waves rose up from the pool. Then they began to swim in the water. They pinched their noses and dived under the surface, then flipped over and tried swimming on their backs. Their limbs moved rapidly as they swam. Chatak! A slap landed on Dadi's cheek, and she was awakened from her sleep. He was still moving his arms and legs. Dadi shook him. Chunnu, oh Chunnu, what's the matter, son? Wake up. Chunnu woke up with a start and asked, Dadi, where is my Phaedra blossom? You like the story? I think Murari ji has written a wonderful story. Yes, a wonderful story. I hope this dream comes true. That we are able to bring love and bring back greenery and plenty into our lives, into our land.
I really did love this story. It's amazing how when you pay attention, you can see how it covers the childish delight and a child's naivete, and also covers so many issues as well, the social, the environmental, all the while showing it as a light-hearted dream that a child's having.
Yeah.
So it's
I
a
like
really
it.
amazing story.
And
Even
yeah,
the translation.
read Murari Sharma more.
Yes.
It's a very fine writer.
Yes, and even the translation does it justice.
Thank
So I haven't read the original.
You must read the original.
Yes,
Nothing
I
beats the
definitely
original. Yeah. If
Yes.
you know that language, then it is best to read the original.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, I'd like to ask, what do you usually do in your free time? Are there any hobbies or interests that you pursue other than translating?
I don't have much free time as of now. But yeah, all that free time that I do have, I like to spend time with my friends. I like to read, which also is part of my profession actually. I like to listen to some music. Yeah, that's it. Hang out with people I love. That's what.
Would you care to share your music preferences with us?
No, I don't have any. Anything will do. Old country music, old songs. I like folk songs very much. I may not even understand some of them, but I like the rhythm. I like ghazals sometimes. So if you listen too much of ghazals, then it makes you sad. So thoda. Huh? I do like, yeah, all kinds of songs. All kinds. I like Punjabi old songs, folk songs very much. I like them.
Ma'am, I'd like to ask, have you thought about any future endeavors that you plan
No.
to pursue?
No, I live each day as it comes. I don't really plan too much ahead.
Living one day at a time.
And time.
And lastly, ma'am, before ending today's session, I would like to request you to share some recommendations, book recommendations for our young readers.
For young readers, oh, I don't know.
Even for me, ma'am, definitely.
For
Even for
Pritha?
me.
Yeah, well, Murari Sharma is one I would like you to read. Yogeshwar is another author. Harnote is one author who I'm very fond of. Sudarshan Vishisht is another author. Of the young and upcoming, I think Dipti Saraswat is writing very well. You could read her. And all these books are available in Kitab Ghar on the mall. So you can look them up. Folk tales of Himachal. Also, folk narratives of the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Those are very interesting stories, which we should read. And I would rather also suggest that you look at folk theatre and also go to performances of folk theatre. So don't only read, but also go to performances where songs and drama are being performed. It will be really nice if you do that. Yeah.
So, any message before we end this interview?
Love yourself, love others, be happy.
Eloquent and perfectly, I'd say, fine because
Cliche.
yes,
It's a cliche.
exactly.
But like, yeah.
A cliche everyone should believe, in my opinion, honestly.
Thank you so much, Pritha. It's been amazing talking to you.
Thank you.
I learned so much from you. Thank you.
Um,
On how
the
to
pleasure's
conduct an
all mine.
interview.
The pleasure's all mine. I learned so many things today, especially talking to someone who has more wisdom than you is.
No, you can say
always-
older. I am much older.
No, older is a different topic, but still, someone who has more wisdom than you.
No,
Because
no.
anyone who's younger than me can also have more wisdom than
Correct.
me.
Correct.
So,
No wisdom is just sharing our lives with each other. That's what I like to do in my free time. Chat. Yeah? Chat with each other, learn from each other, gain insights from other people's experiences. And that's a great way to spend time. And listen.
talking and listening to others does make an impact as well.
Yeah.
So,
So thank you, and thank you Kikli, and thank you Vandana. Thank you for coming and listening in. Thank you so much.